Hello, this is Alexander Siddig, and you're listening to Kneel Before Pod, and don't tune out.
Kneel Before Blog presents Kneel Before Pod.
Internet, the current frontier. These are the ramblings of the podcast Kneel Before Pod. Its continuing mission to converse in endless droves, to seek out new topics and nerdy obsessions, to boldly go on about what many have before.
Captain's Log, Supplemental, Craig Mackenzie recording. Myself and Nick Cook have spent a long time talking about Star Trek The Next Generation, in honour of its 30th anniversary, and we still have lots of content to get through. The journey is long but entertaining, and we continue on with enthusiasm. Welcome to Part 2. Crusher we've already touched on, although it was interesting how she was she took command a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. I liked her backstory with Picard, and I liked... Actually, one of my favourite episodes is Attached, where they almost but don't quite get to hook up.
Yeah, they decide not. Mm-hmm. They decide it's not in the best interests of their friendship. And
it's actually Crusher that says no, which is interesting, because Gates McFadden was apparently one of the big ones for pushing the Picard-Crusher relationship.
Oh, right.
And then the writers made her the one to actually knock it on the head.
Yeah, and then there was the persistent theory throughout that Wesley was actually Picard's son.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not, but it was an interesting theory.
It was a bit too obvious, really.
It was. But yeah, I liked their backstory, and I liked Crusher. Certainly, like you say, she was a bit of a cipher in the first season, but certainly later on she was a lot of fun.
She was very gentle, I think, and obviously she was the opposite to McCoy in that sense, you know.
And the other thing, she would poke fun at Picard.
Yeah.
That was one of the things in First Contact that really bugged me, because in First Contact she's like, when the captain's made his decision, that's it. It's like, that's not Crusher. Crusher would be the one that would have been fulfilling Lily's role and telling her to get his ass together. It's like, blow up the damn ship. That would have been Crusher telling Picard to blow up the damn ship, not somebody he'd just met.
Either you blow up the ship, or
exactly.
I will declare you medically unfit, and I'll blow up the ship.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure she would have said that, but she certainly... you could take the dialogue they gave Lily and verbatim give it to Crusher, and it would have worked.
Yeah. You
didn't need Lily. I mean, in some ways you needed Lily as, that neutral body coming in, but for that, I mean, Crusher pretty much could have fulfilled her role, and a lot of the time, Crusher really was left out of the movies. Yeah. She was pushed aside. That could have given us something substantive to do and would have worked for the character. Instead, she was acting against character by just blindly following Picard's orders. Crusher would never have done that.
No, she was always very independent, and she wasn't afraid of him. She had no reason to be afraid of him.
She would have been the first one to tell him to blow up the damn ship.
Yeah.
And tell him he was being an idiot.
Yeah. I think some of our stories were very love interest driven, though, as well. Not as bad as Troy, but there was...
I really liked Transfigurations. I thought that was a good story for her, and she was very good in it. I liked the script, and I liked it as an episode. I know it's not a hugely popular one, but it's certainly one that I liked a lot. Mm-hmm. And I actually quite liked Suspicions. I thought she was fun in that.
Yeah, and the one where she's in the warp bubble and people are
remember me. Yeah, that's a fun one too.
Yeah, because it's interesting, that one, because it shows you how strong her relationship is with Picard. Because she's sounding like a lunatic. She's like, there was this guy and he's gone, and who, I promise you he was here, and Picard believes her. He doesn't go down that she must be mental route. He goes down the, I trust this person, let's investigate before we declare that she's mental.
Yeah.
It was clever. Yeah, she had some good episodes. I like it. I mean, I'm lukewarm on Descent as a two-parter, but I like her role in that.
Yeah.
Where she's in command of these kind of junior officers.
Does it reasonably well.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a good character. I like Wesley as well.
I don't mind Wesley at all. I quite liked it. Certainly from season 2 onward, I liked Wesley. And he has a great exit from the show in Final Mission.
Of course, you mean Final Mission? Is that the one in season 3 where
4.
He goes off to the academy? 4.
Season 4.
Yeah, because Journey's End is the one where he actually leaves.
Journey's End is his exit from the show, but Final Mission is when he leaves the show as a regular.
Yeah. Journey's End wasn't that good. I never liked the whole... It was important,
I always took a bit of an issue with that, because, I mean, Wesley was always supposed to be the kind of Gene Roddenberry's character. I mean, Roddenberry's middle name was Wesley.
Yeah.
So that was his, in a way for him, Wesley was his character. And, I always it never sat with me well that Ron Moore kind of hijacked that character a bit to take him in a different direction. Because, I mean, Ron Moore had been Navy and they'd kind of go, actually, no, this isn't for me, I'm going to go and do this. And through in the career, he might have had to go and do something he really wanted to do and be the real him. And hijacking Wesley in that way, it just felt wrong to me in some ways.
Yeah, although I think...
It's like, well, no, Wesley never really wanted to be in Starfleet. Well, since when? That was all,
Yeah, take him away from the whole Traveller thing would have been better, though. I think the Traveller stuff wasn't that good.
No, I agree.
He's destined to become a godlike being.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And then he's just back in... He's back in a deleted scene of Nemesis, and
I was kind of glad to see him back, to be honest, so, it's like, all that bullshit. It's out of the way.
Yeah. Although when he was like an ensign and, his involvement in things like Best of Both Worlds and stuff like that, and of course The Game is a bit of a classic that has Ashley Judd in it. She's famous in other ways. So
Indeed.
And The First Duty is his finest moment,
excellent. I think. And he's great in that, as is Patrick Stewart.
Yeah. And Robert Duncan McNeil turning in an early good
as Tom
performance.
Paris before he was Tom Paris.
Yeah. Tom Paris, but for legal reasons.
Yeah. Well, they could easily have made him Tom Paris, but they would have had to pay the person that created the character every episode they used him, so they didn't want to do that.
Yeah, and I think the rationale they gave is that Locarno was somewhat irredeemable because he does the wrong thing consistently, whereas Paris needed to be redeemable. So you had to have Paris confessed on his own.
I don't think Tom Paris was Locarno was irredeemable at all.
I don't think so either. No.
Locarno fell on his own sword for his friends, so in some ways that gels very well with Tom Paris.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about continuity earlier. They pick up from that episode with Ensign Cito.
I know.
Yeah, so...
of course, that was only for one episode.
Yeah, but at the same time, she's just she's there and it's like, oh yeah, you were involved in this incident, and that's one of those, I remember that episode sort of moments, and...
that was nice.
Yeah, and it shows Picard's strength of character because he was like, no other commander in the fleet is going to give her a chance. But I will,
Yeah.
So, that was good. And Wesley kind of weighing up he loves being on... It wasn't Red Squad at the time, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was just I can't remember
some elite thing. Yeah, but it's what would become Red Squad, I think, later on.
Well, I don't think that was really the intention. It was just they were pilots rather than Red Squad. But I don't know.
Yeah, but they were kind of campus jocks, I suppose. As well. They kept saying that. They were the in crowd and so on. So Wesley was tossing up I'm in the in crowd. I'm getting the advanced classes and. We've done this thing and I have to lie about it. And then he's fine with it until Picard shows up and gives him a kick in the arse and says, no, remember the oath that you haven't taken yet but soon will. you have to fess up, or you have no business being in Starfleet, and that really resonates with him. It's interesting. And that's the last you see of him for a bit.
Yeah, he pops up briefly in Parallels.
Yeah,
in an alternate universe.
Yeah, that's a good episode as well. Love that episode.
It is.
Just seeing all the... It's quite subtle as well. Like, sometimes it's just Geordie's a lieutenant instead of lieutenant commander. Data's blue eyes, and they don't call attention to it. It's just kind of there. So, it's cleverly constructed, and it's an important Worf episode because it shows... It gives him a taste of what he could be, which is important for him later on.
Next.
Yeah, have we missed out any main characters? I think that's them all.
Did we do Worf?
Well, I think we've talked about him throughout.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think it started off as nothing, became something.
Yeah.
I suppose his relationship with his son is something that I keep forgetting about. I keep forgetting about Alexander because it's not always that well done. Or maybe it's because I'm not a parent.
It's pretty poorly done, and Worf, at the end of the day, is a pretty dreadful parent.
Yeah, just like bugger off.
Yeah.
It's like... it's the excuse for not having the actor around.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you see him in Deep Space Nine in a couple of episodes.
He's 20 years older.
Yeah, although Klingons mature quicker, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fine. I don't have an issue with that.
It doesn't particularly bother me, but it's like, it's a bit of a cliche.
But yeah, Worf is my favourite Star Trek character.
Okay.
I think it's more about what he becomes in Deep Space Nine and stuff.
He's not...
And
You
can retroactively apply what happens in Deep Space Nine to Next Generation and so on.
He's certainly not my favourite, but he is a good character.
Yeah.
And he's better written on DS9 than he was on TNG.
Well, sometimes he's a bit one-dimensional. He chucks around the word honour and, whatever else. And his ideas are always, can we shoot it?
Yeah, I think TNG was more guilty of that than DS9 was.
Yeah. Well, definitely. In TNG, every time that something showed up, he says, I recommend we fire a full spread of photon torpedoes.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
No, we won't do that. We'll do something else. And definitely the TNG Worf could never take command of anything because he'd be blowing things up left, right and centre because that's all he knew how to do.
Indeed.
Yeah. But good character and Michael Dorn brings a lot to him. That intensity, the authority, it's great. I love Michael Dorn.
He's definitely got a gravitas about him.
Yeah. Such a great voice as well. One of the great vocal performers.
That's well, funnily enough.
Yeah. He shows up in video games a lot as well, does Worf.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does Patrick Stewart, right enough.
That's true.
Yeah. There's no... Yeah, I think we've exhausted the main characters.
Wow.
Do a bit of the recurring... We talked a bit about Barclay. He's the analogue for the fan, so to speak.
He is indeed. I mean, he really is that kind of who we would be in the Star Trek universe, probably.
But I do like the whole from the outside looking in perspective. So it's if you look at, say, Riker hanging around with Geordi and Worf and so on, it's a bit of a boys' club. They go play poker, they have in jokes. It's this tight circle that you can't really break into. And Barclay's like this guy that wishes he was one of them, I suppose, on the outside.
They revisit that a little bit in Lower Decks as well.
Yeah, which one of my favourites. Love that episode.
The officers in that one with like Lavelle and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Lavelle's a kiss ass, but he's not very good at it. Yeah.
But I think they again highlight that thing that the senior staff are this kind of like impenetrable bubble, and it's difficult to get in from the outside, and people outside that bubble probably see them very differently than they see themselves.
Yeah.
And certainly Barclay was, a prime example of that.
Yeah, it's probably quite frustrating working on the Enterprise in a sense because there's only so high you can go because if you want to be chief engineer, well, Geordi's not going anywhere. You want to be tactical officer or security chief, then Worf ain't going anywhere. And Riker's never going to take a command of his own, so no one else could be first officer, and so on. So it would get to the point where it's like I have to get off this ship or my career is over. And you can almost relate to that in the sense of so many people are in jobs that are a bit of a dead end. Where they're stuck and want to move on but can't because there's no opportunities, and maybe the Enterprise is a bit like that. Later Voyager was an extreme example of that. There was nowhere to go because unless someone died you weren't getting their job. So it's interesting from that point of view, and that's Lower Decks kind of touches on that. I mean, they're at the very bottom end of the spectrum there, so They still got quite a distance to go, and was there not a rumour that they were using Lower Decks as a test bed for Voyager?
There was a rumour about that.
Yeah, but thankfully they didn't.
Oh God, the Vulcan.
Torek,
he ended up on Voyager. But there was a rumour that some of these characters would show up on Voyager.
Yeah.
I don't know how much truth was in that. I think the actor playing Torek was somebody's nephew. It might have been Jerry Taylor's nephew.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he showed up as Vorik, who is pointed out in the books as being Torek's brother or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is fine. Another recurring character we got a bit of, Ashley Judd's Robin Leffler. She appeared a couple of times.
She did. She was good. I would like to have seen more of her.
Yeah, only prominently once, though.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where she had her laws.
Mm-hmm.
It clearly felt like they were going to do more with her because they spent a lot of time developing her.
Well, I think Ashley Judd became famous not long after that, so that went out the window. Yeah. If they ever had plans to do more with her.
Whatever happened with the Sonia Gomez character? When she appeared in Q Who?
I actually can't remember. She was in a couple of episodes and then they never had her back.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
She was supposed to be a recurring engineer
she was a good
character.
I would like to have seen more of her. I would like to have seen her developed, but it just never happened.
Yeah.
I always wondered if they were going to try and pair her and Geordie up as well.
Well, it kind of seemed like it was going that way.
Mm-hmm.
She was someone for Geordie to talk to, who wasn't Data.
Mm-hmm. It would have been nice to keep her on and develop her, but it just never happened. I don't know whether the actress wasn't available or just didn't work out, or I don't know.
Or they just went another way with everything.
They may have just gone another way and decided not to use her again.
Yeah. A hugely important supporting character that throughout from when she appeared in season 2 was Guinan, though. She only appeared because Whoopi Goldberg wanted to be on the show, and because Whoopi Goldberg wants to be on the show, you make up a character for her. Yeah, and I love she had the most unique relationship with Picard because she was completely distanced from him. You know, she didn't have to take orders from him. She could tell it like it is, but she still respected him. And the advice she would, and the advice she would give was spot on in all cases.
She was named for a famous bartender.
Yeah,
Texas Guinan, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, she was a great character. I mean, I remember from her brief appearance in Measure of a Man. When Picard's like, what am I going to do? Riker's argument was devastating, and she's like, well, think about it this way. And then she got into the whole slavery angle, which, you know, when you consider Whoopi Goldberg's race, it means a lot when she comes from her, you know.
I think, again, we're talking about, there's an awful lot of really talented actors came on the show and worked on the show, and, you know, they really brought their A game to a lot of stuff they brought on, and Whoopi Goldberg's no exception.
Yeah.
She brought a lot of credibility to the show.
Yeah.
And I think it helped raise other people's game as well. And I think that the other thing is the writers upped their game to give her good material to work. Not always. She wasn't always given great material, but a lot of the time they wrote for the talents of the actors rather than just writing to the stories or writing to the characters. They knew what these actors were capable of doing, and they would write them good material that they knew they would take and knock out the park.
Yeah. Well, Picard got such better advice from her than he ever did from Troy. But you could almost see that dialogue being given to Troy, and it probably should have been.
Probably. It probably should have been. But, you know.
There's even that episode where Troy's like lost her powers, and Guinan says, maybe I could replace you. And everyone's like, yeah, she probably could.
To be fair, one of Marina Sirtis's best episodes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's vulnerable, and she gets to find out why she's actually good at her job, at least in theory. Yeah. I liked Guinan. I liked that she appeared in Generations. Her scenes in Generations were probably some of the best as well. And throughout the show, she was good. I think they didn't overuse her, and they kept an air of mystery around her, like, what is her deal with Q? Question that's never answered.
Probably just as well.
But Q is afraid of her. Which is interesting. He seems to be.
I think certainly at that point they didn't really know what they were doing.
Yeah.
The fact that they never followed up on that makes me suspect that, you know, I think at that time they were maybe wondering that Guinan was more powerful than she eventually was.
Yeah, well, apparently the plan was in Season 5 of Enterprise to do the kind of how Guinan meets Q episode.
There was talk about that, about last Season 5.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that they didn't, because that would have been one of those, I don't need to know the answer to this.
I think it's something we don't need to know.
Yeah. It's just nice to have that mystery. It's like, yeah, Guinan's had this whole other life that we just have no idea about.
Mm-hmm.
She's a mystery, but she's very forthcoming as well.
Mm-hmm.
And always like the little tidbits you get, you know, where she walks in to help Worf, or she walks in to train with Worf, and he's like, I play at level 10, and she's like, I could come down to that level, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, it's things like that. And she could get under Worf's skin in a way that other people couldn't as well.
She could, and she could get away with it.
Yeah.
Because we respected her.
Yeah. So that was great, yeah. Q we've kind of touched on as well.
Wow.
I think he got better in certain episodes.
Oh, definitely. I mean, certainly when he first appears, he's a bit of a cipher, really, and he doesn't bring a lot to the table. And again, I don't think he came into his own until Q Who.
Yeah, and the episode where he loses his abilities is a really good one.
Oh, that's an amazing episode. Yeah. And John Delancey just nails it. And gives Data one of Data's best scenes as well, and one of Q's best scenes.
Yeah. I love the bit where Guinan stabs him with a fork. It's like, where is he just pretending to be human, and she stabs him? Seems human enough to me. And the bit where he's been chased by these wispy aliens. Yeah. And Geordie's just like, Captain, he's not worth it. Let's just let him die. You know, it's like, that's quite cold, but you can see why he thinks that, you know, because he's actively jeopardising their mission. And it's... I like that episode because it gives you a different side of Q where his arrogance is just falling apart.
And the crew aren't perfect because they're not nice to him.
No, and deservedly so, I would say. Another great episode for Q for me was Tapestry.
Tapestry's great. That's a good one for Q and a good one for Picard.
Yeah. It's like Q learns a lot from observing Picard in that episode.
And Picard learns a lot.
Yeah. And I love the bit where Picard's like, but what about the timeline if I change stuff? And he's like, to be blunt, you're not that important.
Yeah.
You know, it's that interesting because they're always so worried about...
Still remains that question mark over whether Q was really there or whether it really just was a near-death experience Picard had.
Yeah, although I generally believe that Q was actually there, and
I think
he wasn't actually changing anything. He was just toying around with Picard because the reason that Picard heals miraculously afterwards, or at least it seemed like that. So I took that to mean that Q did
miraculously. Crusher fixes his injury.
Yeah,
he was in sick bay.
Yeah, but he was kind of dead by that point, wasn't he?
I think you can assume that she was doing stuff.
Yeah,
to revive him.
Plus they seeded that earlier on, where he tells Wesley about that incident, and he says, "And when I was stabbed, I laughed," and he doesn't know why. And then that answers that question.
They took the time to go back and make sure that they recreated that nicely, and they adhered to what they'd set up. So that was nice.
Yeah, and it was a great Q episode. And I like that he was underused in the later seasons. He didn't show up very much. And I can't think of any other time he did show up other than those. Other than the finale, of course. Yeah, Q was good.
Indeed.
We also get other important characters turn up in TNG, like Gowron, who becomes very important in Deep Space Nine. I always liked Gowron because he was very... There was something un-Klingon about him in a lot of ways.
He was very un-Klingon. He was more like an original series Klingon.
Yeah. Nobody trusted him because he was a bit snivelling and a bit incompetent. But,
very like an original series Klingon.
But he knew the right people and he was in the right position at the right time.
And he was good at playing games and playing people against each other.
Yeah.
He knew how to play the power game.
Yeah, he was really good. And again, he wasn't used that much, but when he was, it was all right. And then in Deep Space Nine, he comes into his own even more so. Leading up to Worf killing him and stuff, which is a nice little counterbalance to that because it was Worf who put him where he was in the first place. Duras turned up a couple of times, or the sisters anyway. They were okay.
Yeah, I wasn't so keen on them. They were a bit kind of like, I I was always disappointed with the way they handled Taral after that, because I always kind of wanted to see Taral grow beyond what his family was. And then we meet Taral on DS9 and he's as big a dick as the rest of his family. It's like, no, surely you could have Taral learn from the fact that Worf spared him.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you just make Worf look like a prat for sparing him.
Because he showed up in the Indiana Jones episode, didn't he? And
yeah, I mean, I think it would have been nice if, sort of careless, I think it would have been nice if Taral actually had become leader of the Empire one day. Maybe Taral in the Martok role.
Yeah.
And Taral has learned from the fact that Worf spared him, and it becomes full circle. Worf becomes part of Taral's house.
Yeah, although then you would have missed out on...
And Worf ends up putting Taral in, the Chancellor's role.
Yeah, although you would have missed out on...
We would have missed out on Martok. But, it is what it is. But I think that would have been actually pretty cool. It would have been a nice full circle instead of, Worf spared Taral, but, actually here he is again, and he's a dick, and he's incompetent, and you're like... So you just make Worf look like a prat.
I suppose you could have G.J. Hertzler play Taral.
You could, but he's a lot older than...
That's true.
And under all the makeup, how would you know, I suppose?
Yeah. Maturing Klingons. Fast maturing Klingons.
Yeah.
Although he matures faster than Worf, I suppose, in that sense. Mm-hmm. The problem with the Duras stuff is they kind of dropped the Romulan connection after a fashion.
Yeah.
Because you had Sela and so on.
Well, the Romulans had basically abandoned them anyway.
Yeah. But I felt like there was more of a story there that they didn't bother telling.
Well, that's true, yeah, because there'd always been they'd always been agents of the Romulans sort of thing.
Because they build up Sela and then she disappears completely. Mm-hmm. And is never seen again.
Is never seen again. I always
Other than in a video game.
She should have been in the Denatra role in Nemesis.
Probably, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She turns up in Star Trek Armada, though.
She does. But if she'd been in the Denatra role in Nemesis, that would have been a nice full circle for her.
Yeah. Where she helps Picard and all that stuff. Yeah. That kind of brings us naturally onto the kind of background arc. So you had the Klingon stuff and Worf's Dishonor. That kind of moved across at the same pace.
Well, that was a big part of the series, to be honest.
Yeah, they always fed into each other, and then it culminated in the Civil War, where Worf had to leave the Enterprise to join his brother. Mm-hmm.
Which was a nice arc, actually, and it was nice seeing Worf be a Klingon, but not be a very good Klingon.
Yeah. Well, he was too Starfleet, yeah.
He was too humanised.
Yeah, and I liked Kurn as well. Kurn was good.
Kurn was cool. Again, I didn't like where they ended up with Kurn.
Yeah, where he got his memory erased and stuff like that.
I thought that was terrible.
Yeah. Another good showing for Tony Todd, though. Mm-hmm. He always brought
Tony
some
Todd
good
never
stuff.
Disappoints.
Definitely not. He does good in Star Trek, old Jake Sisko and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very good.
Yeah. And the Dishonor stuff was great. Worf happily accepted this commendation to protect the Empire. That was interesting.
It was nice to see that as an arc, and then Worf goes from, outcast to hero of the Empire to outcast to hero of the Empire.
It was weird when he killed Duras, though, because he kills him and there's almost no consequences for him. Mm-hmm. Like, Picard just forgets about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there was another really great part where he was sifting through Starfleet information, and he was like, "I'm going to use this to help my case," and Picard's like, "That's not yours to use. That's this is an internal Klingon matter, and this is Starfleet information. This is but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it available to everybody who wants to use it, and this is as far as I'm going. Be warned." So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, I quite like that story, and it's weird how it starts in... Is it season 2 it starts in?
Probably... 3, because it's Sins of the Father.
Yeah. And it just keeps going, and eventually it's resolved.
It was great, and that was certainly one of the most interesting parts of TNG was that arc.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely was, and obviously...
the three big arcs in TNG were Picard and the Borg...
Yep.
Worf and the Klingons, and Data and Soong. Data's, journey. Those were the 3 big arcs in TNG.
Yeah. I always liked
they were all interesting.
Yeah, I always liked the whenever Data would find out a bit about his past, where he learned how to dream, or watching him play off himself as Lore, who was excellent. The episode where he plays 3 versions of himself, essentially.
That's a pretty cool episode.
Yeah. And when you see him return as...
The plot's not great, but the Data plot's pretty good in that one.
Yeah, and where it's that sense of family, and then Lore betrays them, and it's really interesting. And I always liked Lore as a villain. I wish it'd been him instead of B4 in Nemesis again.
Yeah, that would have been good. Alas.
Yeah.
We got B4.
Yeah. And outside of those major arcs, you always had this kind of growing Romulan tension and growing Cardassian tension that would crop up every now and again.
The Romulan tension didn't really go anywhere.
No.
But the Cardassian stuff did, and obviously, that built up into both DS9 and Voyager.
Yeah.
More DS9 than Voyager, but it was certainly a thread through both of them. And both of those were very, clearly spun off what they were doing on TNG. And it was almost a shame in the last season of TNG. They spent far too much time trying to set up Voyager than they did actually wrapping up the show, in a way.
Yeah, because you had all the Maquis stuff, and you tied that into Ro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was always
Ro.
disappointed with the way they took Ro as well, because having Ro betray Picard like that always felt wrong. It was understandable, but you just didn't feel like... But to be fair, Michelle Forbes sold it very well, and you could tell that, the character was torn.
Yeah, and I'm glad they didn't use her instead of Major Kira as well. Yeah,
I think that was the right call. I think Michelle Forbes would have been excellent, but I think it was the right call. And I think, I like who we got. I like Kira.
Yeah, and Ro was a bit of a shot in the arm, because she was a bit ballsy, and she would speak her mind.
She had some conflict to the show as well.
Yeah. And that was ultimately why she was brought on, I suppose. Mm-hmm. She had that flirtation with Riker, and she wasn't afraid to tell Picard how it was. And and then the disaster episode, she's the one pushing Troy to make decisions. Yeah. Whereas O'Brien's like, I'll do whatever you tell me. Just tell me to do something. And Rose's like, you have to tell us to do something. Because she can't overthrow her, but she can goad her. That was really good. In terms of the Romulan stuff, it was always it's almost a bit of a Cold War, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we just turn up...
do more with that. Yeah. But, I liked what we got,
Tomahawk was good.
Tomahawk was great. We got a couple of really good episodes in the 3rd season in The Defector and in The Adversary.
Yeah.
But I would like to see them do more with that. But, we got some excellent... And Face of the Enemy.
Yeah. Face of the Enemy was great.
It was probably our best Troy episode.
Yeah, and I liked... in the Pegasus, I love that bit where the Romulan shows up and they both know why they're both there, but they won't admit it officially because it's essentially a recorded conversation. So it's like we're doing tests on gaseous anomalies, and Picard's like, so are we. And do you want some help? And it's like, I don't think we're compatible. Yeah, maybe you're right. And it's that kind of undercurrent of mistrust and stuff. I think they always did that very well, and
they did.
Yeah, the Romulans never seemed like a big threat as such, but it's weird because in the original series they were very militaristic. They were aggressively expanding and things like that. But in TNG they were like, we're just going to float around on our side of the border, crossing now and again, doing little duplicitous things, and things like the Defector, where it's like, we could be starting a war here, but we don't actually want that. So it was that face-off where Picard brought some Klingons with him.
That was great. I remember that moment. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and again, it shows how you can build tension without anybody firing a shot.
That was a jaw dropper at the time.
Yeah.
Going, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great one. So yeah, tiny little arcs, and the Cardassians. You had that flashbacky stuff almost, where it was O'Brien was in the war with them. There was a war at some point. Picard fought in that war as well on the Stargazer.
Well, The Wounded was a great episode as well. As well as giving O'Brien some backstory, which, considering he was just a recurring cast member, was pretty neat.
Yeah, and it's one of the few competent other captains that you see.
Oh, Maxwell was great, and it's just a shame we didn't... I would like to have seen him again.
Although at that point, were they already like shopping characters for Deep Space Nine, and O'Brien was one of them? Was that why they were giving them more to do?
I don't know, to be honest.
I mean, it's maybe a bit early for that, but maybe they were thinking about it at the time, at least.
Yeah.
Next up, I had the definitive moments, or defining moments of the show, which we've kind of touched on throughout. We had the torture, the assimilation, Riker on the Pegasus. These were all really defining moments. Data's scene.
Journey towards humanity.
And his family
he
stuff.
Ultimately does have. He ultimately does find that by dying in Nemesis. We can argue about whether that was well done or not, but, you know, that was the ultimate last step in humanity for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Not as well done as it could have been, but that's a separate issue. We have some other hugely definitive moments in the fact that we had some original series characters make a bit of a return, starting with McCoy in Encounter at Farpoint.
That was nice. And
it was a great little scene.
They didn't even name him, he was just the Admiral, but it was just so well done.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, DeForest Kelley did that for scale.
All right, okay.
He didn't take a big payment for anything, charge him loads. I think he did it for basic, or he did it as a favour for Roddenberry.
Yeah.
I think.
Fair enough. Well, I suppose they were friends. Yeah. It was a great scene.
It was.
Although they gave no adequate reason why he was there. He just kind of was.
Last surviving member of the original crew, I guess.
I suppose, although Chekhov might still be kicking about.
Well, we don't know that, though.
Yeah, it's never explained. No. Unless you take Renegades as canon, which I don't.
Which we don't.
But, Chekhov being the youngest of the human characters.
Could have been around.
Yeah. Sulu, maybe, still kicking somewhere.
Maybe.
Yeah. The next one was Scotty, although Spock was first.
Great.
The Scotty appearance was the best, I think.
Scotty appearance was by far the best. Spock's appearance was okay and kind of tied into Star Trek 6 at the time.
Yeah, it was kind of promoting that, wasn't it?
Absolutely, it was cross-promotion. But Scotty appearance was by far the strongest script and the strongest appearance, and it was great. It was a lovely swan song for James Doohan. With
the Spock thing, I wanted to see him actually aboard the Enterprise.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
It would have been fine. I don't understand what they were going for, although the unification thing came out of nowhere, really.
It really did.
Yeah, but yeah, you're kind of robbed of Spock on the Enterprise D, and commenting on how the crew work, because that's what Scotty did. Scotty was there like, "Holy crap, you work differently to I did in my day," and then I'm going to reference original series episodes, and I'm going to appear like I'm in the way, and
they built that bit of bridge.
Yeah.
They built a section of bridge.
Yeah, it was like they built the chair and the aft console, didn't they? And then they spliced it with stock footage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is why Scotty only sits in these weird places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, he sat at his station, he sat in the captain's chair.
Yeah. It's fine, yeah, not a problem there. And Geordi doesn't come across well in that episode.
He doesn't, but he certainly... You can kind of understand it, because he's got this old guy interfering and actually causing problems, so you can kind of relate to it as well.
Yeah.
But again, he comes across... Again, it's one of those things, you often find these outsiders coming in, and the crew don't always come across in the best way, which again is one of these things I hear about the perfect crew. I always feel that's a little bit over-exaggerated, because, every now and again you get this glimpse of them. Actually, no, they're not the perfect crew.
Geordie's just trying to get to work, and Scotty's just annoying him. And
I kind of like that. It was a nice insight into him.
Yeah.
And into, the setup again.
Yeah, it made their interaction feel more real as well. At the point where they found common ground towards the end of the episode, it was earned because they'd gone through that.
Absolutely.
I know you're a legend, but I don't like you. Go away.
But also, Scotty earned the realization that he is not obsolete.
Yeah.
And that, just because he's old, he still has purpose. He doesn't no longer have purpose. He still has purpose.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
Yeah, and my personal favourite scene in that episode is where Geordie's like, I said to the captain I'd get this thing to him in an hour, and he's like, and how long will it really take?
Yeah, that's a great
He's like, an hour? Just like, no, you're supposed to multiply your estimates by a factor of 4 so that your captain's really impressed. And,
no, that's a total, that's a great scene, actually.
I would have liked to see that pay off later on with Geordi. Like, yeah, this will take a couple hours, and then he gets it done in like 20 minutes. And Picard's impressed. Although
the thing is, I honestly, that's just not who Geordi was.
No,
and I like that it's not who he was. And they kind of got away, and certainly one of the things on DS9, they moved O'Brien more into a Scotty type character.
Yeah, kicking stuff to get it to work.
Yeah, and I was like, I like that he kicked stuff and he was more physical. I mean, that wasn't really a Scotty trait, I guess, but they made him more like this engineering miracle worker than Geordi was.
Yeah, he was
almost like a Scotty Redux.
He was innovative.
He was Irish.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, at least he wasn't Welsh.
Yeah, he was able to innovate, come up with solutions on the fly. That's the Scotty trait you should replicate rather than the the silliness or whatever else. You know, like get the spirit of him right, and then you're there. So yeah, I loved the TOS appearances. That was about it for them. In fact, that was it.
And I'm glad they didn't overdo it, to be honest, because I think that was one of the things they certainly got right with the series. Don't have too much reference to the original.
Yeah.
It becomes too referential, and too forced.
Yeah, just the right amount. Yeah,
balanced it about right.
Yeah, and other personal favourite moments for me throughout TNG. I mean, Chain of Command. We've already talked about the torture bit, but I really liked having another captain aboard because it was, the crew were very complacent by that point. Picard was pretty lenient on them. They got on with stuff, and then
Riker's a dick.
Yeah,
he's really unprofessional.
Yeah,
in fact, the whole crew are. Again, we don't see them as perfect. An outsider comes in, and they're dicks.
Although Geordi has the most rational reason. He says, he's telling me to do all this stuff, but I don't have the time or the resources to do it all.
Guess what, pal? You're in the Navy. Get on with it.
Yeah. And that was Jellicoe's attitude. It's like, I don't give a crap about your...
and ultimately, Jellicoe was right. He may not have had always the best people skills, but he was right as the commander. Yeah.
And... yeah, you can see both sides of the argument where him and Riker are concerned. Riker's just like, look, I don't like you. I'll follow your orders, but I don't like you. And he blatantly disobeys the let's change the rota stuff, and he just doesn't do it. And it's causing personal problems. And Jellicoe's like, I told you to do it, so you're going to do it. And Picard's like, go easy on him. And he's like, no.
Yeah.
You captain your way, I'll captain my way. So, yeah. And if you read some of the books, Jellicoe makes Admiral before he does.
Yeah. Huge frontier.
Yeah. So that was a personal favourite for me. I just liked, again, play with the format a little bit. Lower Decks, as I said, I enjoyed a lot. Just other little bits and pieces throughout. Just
Yeah, for me, Darmok's probably a personal favourite moment. Just... that moment where Picard and Dathan sit around the campfire and Picard tells Dathan about Gilgamesh and Enkidu. It's just such an amazing scene. And Patrick Stewart and Paul Winfield just kill that scene. I mean, it's just amazing. And then that last scene in the ready room where Picard's there with a knife, and it's just a beautiful episode.
Yeah. The Inner Light's a highlight for me as well because it's so off format. It lets Patrick Stewart play Picard, but not Picard. And again, that has repercussions. You see the flute used again in one future episode, fair enough, but I don't think it ever comes up again. But it's a good, interesting
episode.
From
time to time, but it's not overused.
Yeah.
The chase, I really like the chase, where we meet Picard's old archaeology professor, and you get another glimpse into Picard's past, which is really nice.
Although we're explaining why all aliens look like humans thing was a bit overblown. The episode, not the film, First Contact, was one I liked because you see the Enterprise crew from the perspective of the aliens. Yeah, for at least a little while.
And for once they actually come off well when somebody else sees them.
Yeah.
Unlike other times. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Attached, I really like Attached. I like seeing that glimpse into the Picard and Crusher relationship. And actually, you see that, they do both have these feelings, but neither of them's in, they never both seem to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But you can tell that, that relationship is there, and, hopefully one day.
Well, it does it in the books, eventually.
It does. The other one, obviously, I mentioned earlier was Who Watches the Watchers, and I mean, that's just one of my... Just that whole episode, for me, is a favourite moment in Star Trek, period, because it just, it just encapsulates a lot of what stands for Star Trek for me.
Yeah.
Performances, just some of the there's just that amazing moment. It's amazing to me, maybe it's not to you or other people, but that bit when Picard's in the ready room with Nuria and he's showing her planet from the stars, and I think that's something that we could all relate to in a way. It's like, that's almost us.
Yeah.
And then the moment where she's in sick bay and she sees the scientist die and she realizes you're not gods.
Mm-hmm.
You're just people like us. And I think, again, those, again, are defining moments for Star Trek, I think. And I think they underline what Star Trek is to me. It's different for everybody.
Yeah. And
but
that's
for me,
the one you chose last year when we did the 50th anniversary as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. It's a good episode. I haven't seen it in a long time, actually, but...
I could probably quote chunks of it at you. I've seen it hundreds of times.
I know that Ray Wise is in it, and I always like Ray Wise.
Ray Wise is in it.
Yeah.
Yep. And if you've ever watched Californication, David Duchovny's character's agent's wife is the daughter.
Well, there we go. Wow, Star Trek with its actors.
Pamela something or other. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Cool.
OG. That was the character's name.
Fair enough. There we go. A bit of trivia for everyone listening. All three people that are listening.
Yeah.
So, obviously, TNG had a bit of a film presence as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the agenda item I put down is the fact that it changes in the films. Picard becomes a bit more of an action hero.
Very much so. I mean, the TNG movies...
doesn't work.
The tone is very, very different. And instead of becoming an ensemble show, it really did become largely a Picard and Data show.
Picard, Data, and the others. Yeah.
And the others, yeah. I mean, characters like Crusher really got pushed to the side. Geordi largely. Riker sometimes got more to do.
First Contact does the best with the ensemble.
First Contact does the best job of giving them all something to do, albeit not as much as you would like. Again, Crusher still gets sidelined. And as I said earlier, I always think that the character of Lily should not have been there. I think Crusher should have... I mean, come on. Lily comes from sickbay and runs into Picard. That could have been Picard and Crusher, and Crusher should have been the one, again, telling Picard to blow up the damn ship. You know? But they wanted the audience to have a relatable character that could be the audience member in the movie, I guess. But I would really have preferred if they'd done that with Crusher. And I think Gates McFadden's got the acting chops to have done it.
Yeah. And maybe the Lily character contributed to the mainstream success of First Contact as well.
Maybe.
Because it is, excluding the Abrams movies, it's the only one since The Voyage Home to get that kind of mainstream appeal.
Well, I don't know if that was the Lily character so much as it was just a good movie.
Yeah. But I think the Lily made it a bit more accessible to non-Star Trek fans.
And I think that was her purpose.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it. But I don't know. I mean, but then again, you could have done that with Cochrane. Cochrane makes it accessible as well.
Yeah. True. He swears and says things and listens to music and stuff.
Now, that was very controversial at the time because people were not happy. A lot of fans were not happy with the way Cochrane was portrayed in the movie.
Well, it's the same don't meet your heroes stuff, isn't it?
Exactly, but Cochrane was very much intended to be, I think, and I've heard this discussed before, kind of like to sort of represent Gene Roddenberry in there. It's like even that speech is, you talk about my great vision. My great vision was islands and money and naked women. It's like, well, that sounds like Gene Roddenberry to me, I mean,
sounds like Riker,
It does sound like Riker as well. But I mean, I think there was a bit of a tip of the hat to Gene Roddenberry in that, he was a guy who drank and swore and liked the ladies and, was not always the most more ethically upstanding citizen, as to be fair, are not many of us. Yeah. But is held up on a pedestal, and actually when you confront it's like, that's not who I am. And I think, I don't think Roddenberry thought that. Well, I don't know, I never knew the man, but I suspect, a lot of fans have Roddenberry on this pedestal of this is the great Gene Roddenberry who created, like, Utopia. In actual fact, he was a producer who wanted to make money and have a good life and be surrounded by nubile women, which, is not in a completely terrible idea.
No, and it works well enough, I think. I think the trouble I have with Cochrane in that film is I don't quite believe him as a scientist, because he's too much of a goof for the rest of the time, you know.
Is a fair point, yeah. At the time, I remember thinking, and I really like James Cromwell as actor, I think he's great, and I think he did nail the part, but I remember at the time thinking, why don't they just cast Gil Gerard from Buck Rogers? He looks a lot like Glenn Corbett. In hindsight, I don't think that would have been a good choice, but at the time it's like, but he looks like him! I think they made the right choice.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe they should have made him a bit less of a goofball.
Yeah, they could have had a bit more science chat, you know, because he doesn't really... Because he just gets led around by the Enterprise crew.
Yeah,
there should be a point where he had a bit of pride about the Phoenix, because even if he wasn't committed to the dream anymore, there was the idea that I built this thing, and, you know... it's like the bit where there's a red light somewhere and he just whaps the panel and says it'll be fine. And it's... I don't know, it seems a bit...
That was a very Scotty moment.
Yeah. But you've... the interesting thing is the TNG crew see him as the marble statue. You know, that's their perception of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The same way many Star Trek fans seen Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah. And it's a shame that him and Picard didn't share a scene.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Yeah. But Riker being a foil for him because they're a bit alike in some ways, and getting to see Troy drunk was good fun.
Yeah. Well, in the original earlier draft of the script, it was Riker that stayed on the ship and Picard went down to the planet.
Yeah, but then it makes more dramatic sense to have
Picard
fight
it
the
had
Borg.
to be Picard fighting the Borg, not Riker. I mean, the Borg were Picard's nemesis, not Riker's.
Yeah, for sure. The Picard is an action hero because he does, you know, he's picking up the phaser in all three films.
Yeah. Well, that's why Patrick Stewart hit the gym.
Yeah, he's showing off the guns in more ways than one.
Indeed.
Yeah. And there was still enough of Picard in there, I think. But
there was. I think it was still the same character. I mean, maybe you could argue he was going through a bit of a midlife crisis.
Yeah. But the Picard and Data thing, I think it does work in the films.
It does.
How each of... I mean, I don't include Generations, because Generations is a bit of a mishmash of the TV show and then trying to be a feature film, whereas First Contact is very much a feature film. But what you've got
it's still the best of the TNG movies. Although, to be fair, I like Insurrection. It has its problems, but I like it. And I actually like Nemesis. I didn't particularly love it when it came out, but I enjoy it more now than I used to.
There's a better version of Nemesis that was cut, I think. You know.
I agree. There's a lot of character stuff they cut from it. But to be honest, I think as movies go, it's an okay action movie, and there's some fun stuff in there. And actually, some of the stuff on the planet, even though, you know, the Doom Buggy chase, why? Okay, it's kind of fun. But the way it's shot, the colour palette they used for that, I kind of liked. And it was different. It tried to be a bit different. And actually, one of the things I always noticed about Nemesis, if you look at the plot, it's very similar to Star Trek 2009.
Well, I've seen it.
The villain's motivations are not dissimilar.
Yeah. Well, I've seen there's a reviewer I like called SF Debris, and I finally name checked him, and he talks about Star Trek 2009, and he talks about how when you look at the page, what's on the page is comparable in quality to Nemesis. It's just the presentation is a hell of a lot better.
I agree. And I actually think there's a lot of similarities in the story.
There
but
is.
Part of that is the fact they were both trying to come up with their own Khan.
Yes.
You know, every time they're trying... It's the same story over and over again. Let's have a villain. They're trying to destroy something. They've got a super weapon. You're like, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. A lot of it is in presentation. And I think the problem is Nemesis could have been the movie they thought it was going to be. But I think there was a degree of... I think everybody was a bit burnt out on Star Trek, including a lot of fans. And it just... it wasn't placed well...
Well, you release it the same year as a Star Wars movie. And,
it just...
it's iffy.
The interest wasn't there, and it wasn't. It didn't grab people enough. The trailers
it took so long to come out as well. After Insurrection, it was like 4 years. I mean,
it was a long break. But then similarly, there was a long break between 2009 and Into Darkness, and Into Darkness was of a similarly poor quality to the other bad movies. But, you know, that's another matter entirely.
It is indeed. I think TNG as a film franchise doesn't really work. The original series has three main characters, and everyone else orbits them, whereas TNG was an ensemble.
I think the big problem with the TNG movies is the original series movies kind of kept the tone of the original series and kept what made the original series intact, whereas TNG tried to reinvent itself in the movies, and I think that was a big mistake. They didn't really...
It was coming up against other sci-fi action movies.
And it was trying to be a sci-fi action movie. Yeah. And that's still a problem with Star Trek. It wants to be a sci-fi action movie, and it's not always. But it's not always. And the best Star Trek isn't when it's a sci-fi action movie. Yeah. Now, to be fair, again, and I think this is a common criticism, that Star Trek works best on TV, and I think that's true, because when they do movies, they're trying to focus on the things that aren't Star Trek's strengths.
Yeah.
Star Trek's strengths are not when it's being, an action movie. Star Trek's strengths are when it's like, morality plays and depth of storytelling and things like that. And that's the kind of thing. Star Trek does the smaller stuff better.
Yeah.
And the big stuff not so good. Star Wars does the big stuff well and the smaller stuff not so good. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I like I like the big stuff, but I like the smaller stuff better. So the character stuff is kind of thing that appeals to me.
Yeah.
And they sacrificed a lot of that in the movies.
Yeah, and I think I would have really liked to see a TNG movie where it's more about solving a crisis rather than defeating a bad guy.
Where we never got a TNG movie that was the equivalent of Star Trek 4.
No.
There's no villain in Star Trek 4.
No.
Why? And Star Trek 4 is one of the most successful Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
I mean, it was hugely popular at the time.
And they should have had Q in one of the films as a resolution to that in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we'll never get it now. It's been too long.
Oh no! I mean, that boat sailed a good few. As soon as the Abrams movie started, I think that boat sailed. Yeah. You might want to, it's not impossible. You might get some kind of TV reunion at some point. I think it's unlikely, but never say never.
Yeah.
I don't. I think most of the cast would come back, with possibly the exception of Patrick Stewart. Though if you threw enough money at him, he might do it.
I think, he always says that he will, but he doesn't want to alienate a fan base, so of course he's going to say that.
But
we pay his bills at the end of the day, so he's never going to say, "Yeah, I'm done with this crap."
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the cast would probably come back if you offered them a chance.
Yeah.
But again, I think it's largely that. I think that boat sailed. I would never say never, but I think it's unlikely.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to pass off Brent Spiner's data these days.
I think what you could get at some point is a show that takes place, or something that takes place, be it a TV movie or something that takes place post TNG, and you might get some of those characters reoccur. Some of the actors back as older versions. I mean, you could get an Admiral Riker, for instance. That kind of thing. And that Riker as an Admiral is plausible.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah.
Or even just him on the Titan. I would watch that.
Well, I wish they'd done that for the Enterprise finale.
Yeah.
Or actually, what I've always said there should have been in the Enterprise finale was not Pegasus. They should have tied it into Riker's decision as to whether he took command of the Titan or not.
Yeah,
Are we ready to take command?
Yeah. Slightly better. It would have still been rubbish, but yeah.
Should I leave the Enterprise? I'm happy here.
Yeah.
And could have tied that into why Archer gave up the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And that would have been a nice kind of full circle thing, but they never thought that one through. I don't think they thought that one. I think they thought that one through, and they thought they had a great idea, and it was a great idea. Just the script wasn't there. The script didn't work.
It didn't at all.
The script just didn't pay off on the premise. The premise was great, but it just didn't work.
Yeah,
which is a shame.
The films are one thing, but TNG was important in another capacity. It was a springboard for 3 spin-offs, technically, because you wouldn't have had Enterprise without TNG at the end of the day. And it's quite interesting how it became so influential that they made not one, but 2 shows to spin off from it. I mean, that's analogous to, at the moment, where the DC shows, they're spinning off all over the bloody place.
Yeah, I mean, spin-offs were not a new thing at the time.
No.
It was something that happened, but I mean, I think they did a great job of spinning 2 shows off of TNG. My only regret on that is that they really did kind of blow a lot of the last season of TNG on setting up Voyager. Not so much DS9, because DS9 had started up in season 6.
Yeah.
And they didn't waste so much energy on that.
Although they did things like the runabout was built on TNG's budget and all that stuff.
I kind of wish they hadn't made Voyager in some ways, because I think DS9 in some ways became, the black sheep of the family. But DS9 was the better show between Voyager.
And they set up things that they didn't really use on Voyager anyway. The Maquis thing went pretty quickly.
I think DS9 was better set up than Voyager was, and I think it was a better pilot. Although Voyager's pilot was actually very good, I think DS9 had the better pilot of all of the four shows. Well, maybe not Enterprise. Enterprise had a pretty good pilot. Nah, DS9. I prefer DS9's pilot of the four shows, to be honest. But and they didn't put as much work into setting that up on TNG as they did Voyager in season 7.
Yeah.
But I think it paid off that they didn't put as much energy into it, and I think it worked better that we had Picard appear on DS9 to set that up. I wish he'd appeared again.
Well, the only thing they did in TNG that I can remember was Bashir appeared.
Which was nice.
One episode. Although it was supposed to be Dax originally, wasn't it?
It was supposed to be Dax, but Terry Farrell was not
busy.
Available through the schedule for some reason. I can't remember why.
Yeah. But yeah, they put Bashir in, and when you watch the episode, actually, it's more of a Dax thing.
It made more sense for it to be Dax than it did to be to Bashir, but it worked.
It was fine, yeah, and there was was it Birthright, where Worf went to Deep Space Nine?
It was, yeah.
And that was it. And I don't think there's cameos from anyone else.
They both appeared in that one.
Yeah. And the Quark was on the view screen once because he owed Riker money, and Riker said, "Let's slash the debt by whatever, in exchange for information."
I always forget that one.
Yeah, but it's just such a small thing, and it's.
But that was nice,
and it gives you this interconnected universe without making a big deal out of it as well. And it's like
it would have been nice to see more crossovers between TNG and Voyager. We got a couple.
Riker turned up once,
although he doesn't remember it because, wiped his memory. And then obviously Barclay and Troy.
Yeah.
Which was nice.
Yeah, and that was about it, really. Other than just mentions of people here and there.
I suppose the Enterprise springboard was using Cochrane from First Contact.
Yeah, and the Borg, of course.
Yeah. And actually, one of the better Borg episodes of the latter part of the shows was when they turned up on Enterprise. They were actually kind of...
They're menacing again.
Again, which they hadn't been for a long time.
Yeah.
The last time they really had been before that was probably First Contact.
Yeah. And obviously you had the TNG connection to Enterprise that we've discussed at length, which shouldn't have happened, at least not in that way. But it's interesting, the cultural impact, which is another agenda point I had, it's important because it was huge. And they were confident enough to create spin-offs and spend a lot of money on films.
Well, there was certainly a lot more... science fiction became much more mainstream after TNG. Because it was always that kind of geeky thing that, nerds watched. And then all of a sudden TNG became mainstream, and then sci-fi became more mainstream.
Yeah.
So it certainly had an impact. And we talk about all the kind of technological innovation that was dreamed up on Star Trek, and it's not that simple. A lot of these things were dreamed up other places as well.
Yeah.
But, TNG, they have pads, we have iPads now,
Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Laptops.
Tricorders, laptops, yeah. I'm not saying TNG was purely responsible for these things, but certainly, much as with the original series, people saw these things and were inspired in some degree to them. There was always people who were thinking about these things anyway. Yeah,
people attribute their careers in science and things to watching Star Trek.
Yeah,
though,
and TNG had that impact as well.
Yeah. Why do you think it had that impact? 'Cause it's very weird, because the original series was very niche. It was popular, but it was niche, It wasn't even popular enough to get a fourth season.
No.
And
considering the third season wasn't very good, that's probably not a bad thing.
Yeah. And they were trying to kill it in season 3 as well.
Oh, definitely.
But, why do you think TNG became so synonymous with
honestly,
good sci-fi?
I don't know. How do you catch lightning in a bottle twice? I don't know. I just think it was the right place, the right time. I think it was lucky in that the studio was willing to keep it going. If TNG aired in the form it aired now, at the start. I mean, it wouldn't. I doubt it would have even lasted its first season.
People wouldn't tolerate season 1 of TNG now as a new show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you hear about shows that just don't make it out of the first season.
I mean, it wouldn't have made it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only reason it lasted as long as it did was because it had the Star Trek name behind it, and it lasted long enough to get good. A lot of that I would attribute to Michael Piller. Michael Piller's influence on the writing room was transformative. I mean, you can attribute a lot of the quality of modern Star Trek to Michael Piller and latterly Ira Stephen Bear, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Ron Moore, even Brannon Braga. I mean, for all people rag on Brannon Braga, I mean, some of the high concept stuff was Brannon Braga. And I mean, when Brannon Braga's firing on all cylinders, he does great work. When he's not.
Yeah, well, I don't.
But, everybody has their ups and downs.
I don't blame him or Berman for the.
Oh God, no! And I think
the reduction in quality. They were just. They just shouldn't have been kept on the franchise as long as they were.
The show would not have lasted as long as it did without Rick Berman. And I think a lot of times Rick Berman did more to protect, and I say this in quotes, Gene's vision than a lot of people give him credit for. And I think if you listen to what the writers say, a lot of the times it was Rick Berman that would say, no, that's not. It was Rick Berman that would say no to things because Gene wouldn't approve of it. So, to be fair, I mean, obviously he was putting that through the lens of the way he interpreted what Gene would have wanted, and that's never going to be 100% reliable. But I think his intentions were positive, and I've never liked the way Berman or Braga, for that matter, get attacked by fans. And funnily enough, now it's not Berman and Braga. Now we're praising Braga, and he's on the Orville, and proper Star Trek again. It's like 10 years ago you were slamming this guy because his Star Trek was terrible, and now you're like singing his praises. Meanwhile, you're slanging J.J. Abrams for doing the same thing.
Well, there's they're a portrait of two people that just had no more left to give. Mm-hmm. By the time Enterprise was on, they probably weren't there because they wanted to be there. They were there because the network kept them on. And
well, the thing is, they wanted to approach the series very differently than the network let them. I mean, they didn't even want the ship to. They didn't even want them to leave Earth until I think the end of the first season. The whole first season to be about building the ship. Yeah. What an amazing idea that would have been. I mean, seriously. And that would not have been episodic storytelling.
No,
that would have been an arc.
Yeah.
I mean, they had some good ideas for that, which the network wouldn't let them do it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And Braga had the idea of making a Year of Hell a season-long arc.
Oh yeah, no, that would have been phenomenal.
He was vetoed from doing that because
and not have a reset at the end of it.
Yeah, which would have been because it would have been too different. It would have been just, which is a shame. And I think. Yeah, you can't really blame them for writing Star Trek for 20 years.
I mean, a lot of the time it was the network that had demands on them. So I think fans are often unfair to them. I don't think they're perfect, and I think they made their share of mistakes. But they're mistakes. They're making a TV show.
I don't think they should be writing Star Trek anymore. I don't think they've got anything new to tell us.
Probably not.
Because Braga did that comic series, which was a Borg thing, and it was like, it's. In the future, the Borg have taken over and all that stuff, and it's like
this is okay. Yeah. To be honest, I don't know how much influence he had on that story. To be honest,
no, he did write it though. So
did he? I thought he was involved in writing it, but I don't think he was the only writer on it.
And that comic had the the Borg were hiding in the Mutara Nebula, which doesn't exist, and it was nonsense. But again, they'd written Star Trek for 20 years, so they were just churning out the same old stuff because giving it on.
Story by Brannon Braga, script by Terry Matalas and Travis Pickett.
All right,
so he only contributed the story.
Fair enough, which was bad enough, But
I thought it was okay.
But again, some of my favourite Star Trek episodes were written by Brannon Braga. The Cause and Effect, that was him, I'm sure.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting, mind-bending episode. Stuff like that.
And it's
Threshold.
My favourite.
Threshold's a Voyager episode. That's pretty
First
terrible.
Contact, the movie. He wrote it with, Ron Moore.
Yeah.
And that's a favourite.
Yeah, and the TNG finale. And
absolutely. All good things.
So, it has a legacy. So, they have a legacy, and they should be proud of what they did. And
I'm sure they are.
It's weird. Star Trek's this progressive franchise, but the fans are anything but sometimes.
I know. That's a shame.
Yeah, we've got Discovery soon. We should be excited.
I'm excited. 2 weeks.
I'm excited. 2 weeks. 2 weeks today, as of when we're recording this.
And we've got Netflix. Woo! Netflix.
Yeah. Good times. So, I think this has been a long podcast. And,
This has been a long podcast.
But how else can you really talk about 30 years of TNG? I mean, it's...
Indeed.
It's bigger than all of us. And,
That's true.
And I think we've given it a fair shake, I would say. I think that's fair to say.
Have.
Yeah. Do you have anything to wrap up on before I beam you back?
I guess not. I mean, for me, it was... As a show, it was transformative. I mean, it's probably to this day still my favourite TV show. And, you know, there are better shows out there. I mean, probably shouldn't say it. Battlestar Galactica is probably a better show, but I prefer TNG. It's still one of my favourites. It's my go-to. It's like a comfortable old blanket.
Yeah. I think it's unfair to compare Battlestar Galactica to the Next Generation.
I mean, it's a different thing. I mean, it's like trying to compare, I don't know, Xena to
Buffy.
Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Xena to Game of Thrones, yeah. I think...
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, you wouldn't have Battlestar if you didn't have TNG, though.
Oh, God, no. Battlestar.
Especially, if you look at it on a macro level, you've got Ron Moore. The lessons he learned working on these shows.
Absolutely. And like I say, TNG made sci-fi more acceptable to the mainstream, and if that wasn't the case, you would not have gotten a reboot of Battlestar Galactica, and it certainly wouldn't have been the show we got.
Yeah. So we should be grateful, you know. And
absolutely.
It is a show I'll probably watch throughout my entire lifetime. I'll buy the 4K re-release. I'll buy the holodeck re-release. I'll buy the brain chip re-release. It's going to keep taking my money until I die.
It takes my money all the time.
Yeah, but yeah, it's to be celebrated. It's one of my favourite shows of all time. I love it. Revisit it all the time. It's my favourite franchise of all time. It's part of it. It's a huge part of it. It's an important part of it. It's probably the linchpin. You know, if you didn't have TNG, you wouldn't have anything else. And even original series might be forgotten by now if it wasn't for it. You know, but
and I think we could live in a very different universe had we gotten Star Trek Phase 2 instead of Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Yeah,
and to be fair, we wouldn't even have the spin-offs we got if it hadn't been for Wrath Khan and Nick Mayer. I mean, he made Star Trek successful again. If Star Trek 2 hadn't been successful, we would never have had any of those spin-offs. Maybe we'd be looking at we might be getting a complete reboot of the Star Trek franchise now, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe on television with with whoever is
Someone
Captain
Kirk. Might have let's try the Star Trek thing again. But, it certainly wouldn't have the continuity and history behind it that the current...
With a gender-bent Sulu,
With a gender-bent Sulu, probably.
Yeah. I don't know why I pick on Sulu specifically.
Something else to upset George Takei. Oh, no, my Sulu was never gay. It's like, give her. How do you know Sulu wasn't bisexual? Give her a break.
Also, if you watch Star Trek Beyond, it's not clear that Sulu's gay. But
it's not clear that Sulu's gay.
It's clear that he knows someone who has a little girl.
Even if that's the case and he's in a same-sex relationship, that does not mean he's gay. It could mean he's bisexual.
Yeah, it's the 23rd century, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's one thing TNG fails on, just as a last thing. It fails to introduce gay characters, and it's still not something that's been done.
It kind of they're doing it in Discovery.
Yeah.
It kind of
as of this date, it hasn't been done.
It skirts around it a little bit, and I mean, there was certainly a drive to try and do it, but they really missed the boat on that. And I think it's one of the areas where they just weren't progressive enough.
Yeah.
But, others may disagree. I'm sure, others do disagree.
Yeah.
If you listen to some of the comments about Star Trek Discovery. But,
I suppose the closest would be Dax, who was at best bisexual.
Yeah.
Because of the virtues of her...
I mean, Jonathan Frakes, the episode The Outcast, which was kind of touching on homosexuality and kind of touching on transgenderism, I guess. I mean, Frakes had said all along they should have cast a man in that role instead of a woman, and I think that would have been good. But, again, they just weren't quite gutsy enough on that. Maybe it's because they just, I don't know, maybe they thought, we're not gutsy enough to do that with science fiction, whereas,
It's kind of too soon, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it was. I mean, having said that, if you
I think that's what they thought. Maybe
in the 80s, there was 30-something was on TV, and I remember they got a huge backlash for just having a scene with two men in bed, just sitting there talking, and networks, sponsors pulled out, and there's all sorts of 30-something was a very successful show, and that was very gutsy. And then L.A. Law. L.A. Law had same-sex, but although it was two women, relationship in it, or at least a flirtation with it. It was so it wasn't a lot of that going on, I guess. And I think the time to do it was probably around about the middle of TNG, and they just missed that boat. And then,
yeah, and the rumor was that Malcolm might be gay in Enterprise.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever really seriously considered, if any, But I don't know.
I've not ever seen anything official backing that up.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
And there was talk about Hawk in First Contact being gay, but again, none of that was ever.
Which was fleshed out in the books.
It was fleshed out in the books, but there was never anything concrete saying that that was the intention in the movie.
Not in the film, no.
No.
So yeah, Discovery will do that and solves that problem, which makes, weirdly, Star Trek latest to the party for that.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But, at least they're there.
You can only be so progressive, I suppose.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting to you about
Indeed.
TNG. It's been, the time has absolutely flown in. I've enjoyed it, continue to enjoy it, and it makes me want to go back and watch it from the beginning again.
Yeah, I would go and watch them tonight, but I think I'll be watching The Expanse instead.
I'll get about 3 episodes in and decide, oh no, this is rubbish. For TNG, I haven't seen The Expanse yet.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would get halfway through Naked Now and be like, ugh, turn this off.
Yeah, I'm not watching Naked Now.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if I ever watch that again.
You will at some point, guaranteed. When they give you the 4K holo re-release.
Well, maybe. I suppose I did rewatch it when it came out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, there you go. The next release, you'll end up watching it. The sense around, whatever, the smell-o-vision release.
Yeah.
Although I don't really want to smell Naked Now. It feels like...
No, I suspect that's probably not such a good idea.
So, yeah, on that note, if you'll step on the transporter pad, I will beam you back to where you came from. So, thank you for coming on. Apologies from Sandy, who had some technical issues and had to eject his warp core. Or something. I was trying to go for some technobabble excuse, but I failed.
That's okay.
Yeah. He has a problem with the phase inducers. There we go. Whatever those do. They induce phase. They induce phase. That's what they do. Yes. So, thank you again.
And to you.
And energizing. So, that was our extended discussion of Star Trek The Next Generation in honour of its 30th anniversary. We hope you've enjoyed it and that you feel we've done it justice. Thanks to YouTubers Captain Meatshield and Samo Studios for the music you've heard here. If you like what you heard, then don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, YouTube or any major podcasting app. And join us on the next Kneel Before Pod.